Nice one.
Oh, got it? Yeah, she's in.
Dude! Oh. Yes!
All right, let's see that fish, Jess.
Dude, we finally got her! Oh my god, dude!
Hey guys, welcome back to the studio here. Today I am really excited to talk to you about one of my all-time favorite Joe Bucher Outdoors products, and that is the jointed DepthRaider. Here I'm holding one of their brand new colors, which you've seen now on the show, is the Crackerjack Tiger color. It's this kind of bright orange, and it's got these nice stripes in it. Really a solid color. Got the white belly, and you've seen this on the show, including the monster fish that Mike Richardson and I caught just this past fall. And today the goal here with the jointed DepthRaider is to go over my how-to essentially with this lure. Where do I like to throw it? What types of structure, the equipment, and so forth. I want to cover all the basics and really talk in detail about the jointed DR. So let's talk equipment first. What type of rod do I like to throw this on? Well, that would be St. Croix's either Legend Tournament or Legend Elite Musky rods. They're 8'6" length, medium heavy power, fast action. So let's talk details about each one of those specs real quick. Why do I like the 8'6"? Well, whether I'm casting or trolling the jointed DR, I really like a longer rod for either of these applications, especially for casting. Because anytime you're figure eighting a musky lure, the longer rod is better, especially when you're trying to trigger muskies at boat side. Oh, got him, man!
Yep, she's hooked pretty well. Dude! Always do a figure eight, even when you don't see a muskie coming. This fish hit on a blind figure eight, never saw her coming, and she just pounded it.
And one of the neat things is how many muskies follow in deep. A lot of folks don't realize muskies follow deep diving crankbaits, and they will hit them in the figure eight just like they will a Bucher tail or a top raider. I mean, they just absolutely pound these lures in the figure eight. So the Lathe Rod there is really important. I like to make big, wide turns just like I would any other lure. Now, why not throw the 9? You know, that would be even longer, right? Or the 10. I like the 8'6" personally because when I'm working a deep diving crankbait, a lot of times I'm spending, I'm spending a considerable amount of time pumping the lure, rocking it back and forth. I'm using my forearm and my bicep and my shoulder. Coming up here a lot. Lessening that length by 6 inches, going from the 9 to the 8'6", makes a significant difference as far as longevity when you're fishing, again, over a long day. Let's say you're putting in a week in Canada, or it doesn't really matter. If you're in Minnesota or Eagle River, Wisconsin, where I do a lot of my fishing, a little bit, decrease in that overall length of the rod really helps longevity with the arm. So that's why the 8'6" is my go-to. It seems to be a sweet spot between as long as I can get away with, but it doesn't quite fatigue me as much, and I get monster figure eights. Could you get away with an 8? Absolutely. I wouldn't go as short as a 7'6", but 8 to 9 feet in length, my sweet spot again is 8'6", and I like a medium heavy power. Action, you want a fast action. The reason you want a fast action is because when I'm working in weed cover and I'm pulling, like I was talking earlier, I'm pumping the rod, I want to be able to pull that lure and I want the rod tip to snap back into place. The action of a rod is really just a rating on the quickness that rod tip snaps back. A fast action really, again, is telling you that rod tip's going to snap back into place and it's going to be ready for that next pump as you're working this either along weed cover or rocks or even trolling for that matter. Now, let's talk reels, okay? I prefer to throw this on a 400 size reel, anywhere in that I'd go as low as 5.1 to 1 and as high as 6.1 to 1 in gear ratio. I think that's the perfect speed for me. Again, I prefer the 6.1. I'm using the Daiwa 400H quite a bit on my YouTube channel. You guys have seen that reel all over the place. I really like that reel and that gear ratio and that speed, especially when I'm throwing something with a big diving lip like this. You know, occasionally I'll throw with a 5.1 to 1, but again, I really like that 6.1. It seems to be that just middle ground that really is comfortable for me. I can speed it up if I need to, and I've got plenty of horsepower left in the tank there. Line, super important topic when it comes to diving crankbaits. Thinner diameter lines will get you a deeper running depth, shallower, and you want to go with a thicker diameter. I prefer to go with Joe Bucher Outdoors Beast Braid. You know, again, I've talked about this a long time ago. I prototyped a lot of different lines when JBO was coming out with a fishing line, and their Beast Braid is absolutely just bulletproof stuff. Got to check it out if you haven't. The Tannic Brown is just phenomenal in stained water flowages. I fish the Eagle River and Three Lakes area. Those chains are awfully stained. Tannic Brown is really my go-to color choice there. But back to you know, the diameter on the 80-pound test Beast Braid it's 18-pound test diameter, and the test is 80 pound. I prefer 80-pound test. Again, that to me it's got enough you know, horsepower, I guess we'll say, to really, you know, give my line tons of protection. I mean, this lure is designed to fish in cover. 80-pound test is strong enough to withstand all the abrasion that the rocks and the wood and all different types, the net, you name it. 80-pound test Beast Braid is pretty darn tough. And I'm going to get into this in more detail as we go, but 80-pound test allows me to click and tick rock reefs in the 10-foot range when I'm casting, and again, when I'm trolling, it doesn't quite affect it as much because I can vary that length of line and the speed of the boat pretty easily. I will, in certain circumstances, use 65-pound test for casting, but you know, that'll get me a little bit deeper running depth, but most of the time I'm throwing the jointed DR with 80-pound test. Let's talk leaders now. You know, I'm a big fan of the classic no BS system. I've used the fluorocarbon. I never got bit off with fluorocarbon, but I got nicks, I got scratches, and it was pretty darn close. So I don't really throw fluorocarbon anymore. That's just my personal preference. I like to go with JBO's standard 11-inch steel piano wire leader. I'm not sure what the exact pound testage is on those. I think it's like 165 pound. It's bulletproof. You know, can it get a little banged up in the net? Of course, but you can just straighten that wire out. To me, it's really no BS, and it gives the lure a little bit of added weight, and it makes it a little bit less buoyant, which is really important either when I'm fishing rocks or weeds. So hook size, I really do like the hook straight out of the box. JBO really has a nice 3/0 class hook on this lure. You have seen me though, I've talked about it plenty, like my video where I lost Big Boy. It's a real heartbreaker, but again, you saw me putting on the 3/0 KVDs. I like this KVD style hook. It's got an inward, you know, kind of bent point that really seems to keep fish pinned real nice, and it's got a super short shank, so these hooks really do not tangle much. So that's about it when it comes down to the equipment for fishing the jointed DR. Oh, I did forget to mention split rings. I really, you know, fish these size 7 split rings on most of my conventional size musky lures. This is the 8-inch model here on the jointed DR, and the number 7 size split rings are really a good size for this lure. Okay, so let's talk about structure. I fish the jointed DepthRaider in both weed structure and rock structure, and I want to make the distinction here and just really get to the point as far as when I'm using this lure in the weeds and when I'm using it over rock structure. So I'll talk about weed structure first and why I fish this over weed structure, or what I do, I should say, because that's even more important. Daytime fishing, I'm really throwing, predominantly throwing the straight model DepthRaider. And that's because, again, when I'm fishing in thick weed cover, the straight model gives me a little bit more buoyancy, and that's something I want. When I'm ticking and clicking, I shouldn't say ticking and clicking, when I'm probing the deeper edge of a weed edge, I want a lure that when I get stuck in the weeds, it's going to rise out. That's when I'm fishing the straight model. But why would you throw, or when would you throw the jointed model when you're fishing weed structure, and that would be at night. Hands down for me, no questions asked. I catch more muskies at night on the jointed DepthRaider, especially in stained waters. Again, I catch them on clear waters too, but when it comes to stained water and night fishing, you just can't beat the jointed model. It produces so much more vibration, so much more noise in the water. These muskies find this lure. Now, when I'm fishing over rock structure, I like to mix it up. I will throw the straight model and the jointed model, but this lure really shines when I am trolling. I don't know what it is about trolling the jointed model. I think I'm fishing overall deeper depths, and when I think this lure gets down so deep, it helps to have that extra vibration. So rock structure and fishing at night, those are my two spots that I really like the jointed lure. Now, again, another reason the jointed lure is really cool is when I'm fishing in cold fronts. So, when I need a lure that I can actually crank a little slower, when you're fishing a post-frontal type day, the muskies are harder to catch. You want to keep the lure in the strike zone for the longest period of time possible so that you can have a better chance of getting that fish to come out of its ambush spot and maybe grab the lure, or at least get that big girl into the figure eight. The jointed model is really cool because it gives the illusion of speed. You do not need to crank the jointed DR as fast to get the action out of this lure. So another really cool place that I like to fish this is in cold fronts. Now, again, getting back to rock structure, there's many different types of rock structure out there, but more importantly, you guys have seen this in a number of different videos, the type of rock structure really where this lure shines, and this is my number one, hands down best trolling bait. Now that motor trolling is legal here in Wisconsin, I really have taken advantage of that, and for good reason. We catch a lot of muskies trolling. The jointed DR is my number one trolling bait. Again, I was just saying this earlier, when it gets down to those deeper running depths and that, 14 to 20 to 22 feet of water, the light penetration is just not very good down there. And again, I think those muskies are really feeding by feel more so than sight. When the lure gets down that deep, they're using their lateral line and all their senses to feel it out. And the jointed lure is just a better producer for me when it comes down to trolling rock structure. Now, one thing that I'll talk about when I'm discussing trolling is I'm not always trolling over rock structure. So, one of the techniques that I use with this jointed DepthRaider is called bottom balancing. And again, why would I say I'm not always trolling rock structure? Well, what you find when you're trolling large expanses of break lines is that you get a lot of patches of soft bottom, and then you'll hit a really good patch of hard bottom. That's when I'm really catching the muskies, when I get a real jaggedy patch of boulders and rocks that's kind of spread out and surrounded by some soft bottom. That's where I'm going to catch the muskies, on the hard bottom. A lot of times it's right before, it's right after. I'll catch them in the middle, around debris, fish cribs, logs, you name it. That's really where I'm picking up a lot of muskies in the jointed DepthRaider trolling. I prefer to fish that primary break line when I'm trolling this lure. A lot of times it really depends on the style of lake you're fishing. A lot of times I'm trolling this lure between 10 feet and I'd say 18 to 20 foot. A lot of the lakes I'm fishing, that is the primary break right before it starts dropping into the main lake basin. Now, just getting back a little bit to the casting side of things, this particular lure will attain a max running depth on a cast of about 10 foot. I can sometimes tick 10.5 feet on a super long bomb cast, but again, just talking about the running depth here on the jointed DepthRaider, probably about 10 foot or so. That's what I'm looking at. You put a thinner diameter line in your reel, you might be able to hit 11, but again, I'm looking at fishing rock reefs that top out in that 8 to 10 foot range when I'm fishing this. So another really important question here, guys, is we talk about casting versus trolling the jointed DepthRaider over rock structure. Okay, let's pick rock structure here. Why would you choose to cast versus troll? Really good question. Well, it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what type of structure you're fishing. If I'm fishing a lot of times really elaborate, and really, I guess I'd say, maybe I'll call them nitpicky rock reefs that have tons of inside turns, and they're very complex. I'm going to try to cast when possible if it's not too cold. I just think I can cover all the little nooks and crannies, the inside turns better casting than I can trolling. I can hit the tops of that rock reef, and I can cast parallel, perpendicular, you name it. I can really go to work casting when it comes to elaborate, complex rock reefs. When I'm working a primary break line, and I'm going to be covering a large expanse of water, that is no doubt when I'm going to choose to troll this lure. I can keep it in the strike zone much longer by trolling it than I can casting it. So that's really the difference. If I'm going to really work a large expanse of water, I'm going to troll this lure. If I'm going to work a real complex reef, I'm going to cast it. Now, I will still do trolling passes and mix and match my casting and trolling with this lure. I will troll over the edges, or I'll troll over the deeper break lines on a complex structure. But again, my first idea when it comes to complexity is to cast, because I think I can just cover more water more effectively like that. And when I'm trolling, I'm really looking to just cover ground and see if I can find an active fish, especially when I'm on big water. So guys, there you have it. That is my crash course on the jointed DepthRaider, from casting and trolling it to the equipment, the hooks. This lure is just a phenomenal producer for me, primarily at night and in the late fall trolling. It's a fantastic lure. Definitely got to pick some of these up for the 2019 season if you haven't already. And if you guys have any questions or comments, especially on the trolling thing, a lot of guys want to know, what length of line do you prefer, what depth and things like that. Please leave those comments below. Let's get some good conversations started. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks as always for watching.
Chaz Martin's Musky Mastery Outdoors is brought to you by Joe Bucher Outdoors, #1 in big game fish products, and by St. Croix Rods, best rods on earth. Fish more, worry less.